Welcome to the Neighbors Table podcast. This is a podcast where we spend time listening to the stories of others, of those who have been changed and those who bring change. There's a lot that happens within the reality of our justice system in America. And we long and we pray for the church to be proximate to the justice system and all of its brokenness, praying that the people of God would see an opportunity to fellowship with Jesus and to carry out the mission of loving the least of these. Today we have a special friend of mine coming on and sharing his story. This is my boy Josh. He goes by also Bazooka the Disciple. He's a rapper, he's a barber, a barbershop owner, he's a father, a husband, and someone that I've been blessed to learn a lot from. His story is powerful, and I hope those of you who are listening today would be blessed by it. So without going on any further, here's Josh's story.
Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about myself, man. I go by Bazooka. My stage name is Bazooka the Disciple. I'm out of Moreno Valley, California. It's about 60 miles east of LA, and my mother and father, they're originally from, my mom, she's from, West LA, and then my father's from Watts. And so that's where they grew up and they met and then had me and my brother. I'm a twin. So me and my brother, we were, my mom and dad, they moved out to Moreno Valley in the late 80s, early 90s. And that's what a lot of black families specifically were moving out of LA just because of the inflation and the way that, even the gang violence and a lot of that was, heightened during that time. So they left to try to, put me and my brother in a better environment. And then, so that's where I grew up at. And at the age of, I think, 4 or 5, I had a pretty normal upbringing. I was in a household with both parents and everything like that. And at the age of like 4 or 5, my brother was diagnosed with autism. And so that was kind of like, that's when things started to change. My mom and dad, there was a lot of strain on their marriage, and and dealing with that, that's stressful.
Yeah.
Having to run back and forth to, different appointments and medications and doctor's appointments and going to the school for IEPs and parent-teacher meetings. And so, always that kind of made me feel different, being a twin and not really understanding that as a child and feeling different, even feeling like the only child at times. And so I didn't have like that familial feeling in the house, even though I had both parents, they were busy tending to my brother. And so, I felt alone. I felt like I didn't really feel at home, even though I was at home. So I was outside most of the time, and I started, what you would call being like a social butterfly. And it started off innocent, where I'm just out and about hanging with kids, because that's where I found my family at, being outside. But then eventually you start meeting a lot more other people who are doing a lot of other things that you're not used to. And so I think I was in search for identity, and I'm not any different than most of everybody, because that's what we're looking for, meaning and purpose and identity. Yeah. And so because I didn't have identity at home, I looked for identity outside. And so that's, when that combination, when you have somebody who doesn't have identity at home and they go outside, well, then you take upon an identity that was never meant for you. And so I guess normally where you would see, the stereotype is that when somebody has, was brought up in the household with both parents, you don't think that they're susceptible to gangs and street activity and, blase blah. But that, just because you have two parents at home, if you're not being tended to like you're supposed to, and you're not being, what would you say, when the attention isn't there, you know what I'm saying? When there's certain things that the parents aren't picking up on, then, you know, you're still, you know, nobody's exempt from being, you know, falling into that trap. Yeah. And so I started going to, I think when I was in middle school, you know, I started hanging out with a certain crowd. And then I ended up getting expelled from school in the 7th grade because I brought a knife to school. And the reason why I brought a knife was because I was trying to defend myself, you know, against another kid who was in a gang. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't in a gang. I was more kind of by myself during that time. Mm-hmm. And so I brought a knife to school. It just so happened that I remember going to the bathroom, and I think my backpack wasn't zipped up, and so my backpack fell open, and then the knife was like right there in the middle of the class. It was a kitchen knife. Oh, shoot. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so the teacher saw it, and she immediately called the campus officer and had me escorted to the office in handcuffs. You know, I was about 12 years old at that point. Mm-hmm. And so I got expelled out of the school district for that because they have a zero tolerance policy for weapons. Mm-hmm. So then I was, at that point I went to like a day school, kind of like it's for like delinquents or what do you call it? For troubled youth, right?
Yeah.
So I went to a school for troubled youth, and when I was there, that's when I started really congregating with people. You know what I mean?
It probably exposed you to more that you weren't exposed to.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely a lot more exposure to the criminal element of things, you know, even at that age. And so, and I mean, it all kind of went downhill from there. That's when I started smoking weed, and you know, I wasn't a gang member, but I was gang affiliated. Yeah. And so I wasn't necessarily like repping any, you know, specific hood, but I started affiliating with different people, you know, rubbing shoulders and, you know, just being in the streets. And so, and that's when I started catching cases, and I mean, going to juvie, breaking in homes, selling weed, selling pills, and stuff I didn't really have to do. Because I look back now that I'll be 35 in November. And so I look back now and it's like, I don't even know why. I didn't have to do it to survive, you know, because once again, I had both parents at home, but I was looking for identity and purpose. And because this is what was in front of me, and because my peers were doing these things because they legitimately felt like they needed to, you know, they didn't have any other options. They didn't, a lot like me, I'm one of the few that had both parents at home. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, things kind of turned out the way they turned out. I ended up catching cases, and so I think when I turned 18, that's when it all went, you know, to hell, you know, pardon my language. But I ended up, so I got my oldest son's mom pregnant, and then probably like the first 6 months of me turning 18, I ended up going to jail. But then so I went to jail. I caught a case for, I had possession of sales. Mm-hmm. I just got caught with like, probably like some dime, like probably like 8-9 dime bags of weed. And so because they were bagged up, you know, they charged me for sales. And so I ended up going to the county, and then so I called my dad. My dad had, at that point, his health started declining because he like smoked cigarettes real bad. And so he got diagnosed with COPD. And me and him at that point, we didn't really have the best relationship because, like I said, since I had been tied up and I had been doing so much, you know, he couldn't control me. Like he couldn't, I wouldn't say control, he couldn't father me the way that he wanted to.
You are doing your thing.
I was already so far gone, like mentally, right? I had already like detached myself from him and my mom. And so So I was on the phone. I called my mom and dad collect, but my mom, she was at the hospital with my dad, and my dad had been in and out of the hospital at this time, so I didn't really think nothing of it. And then so when I called my mom, and she's like, yeah, I'm at the hospital with your dad right now. And I'm like, okay, well, when you guys are getting out? And she was just like, man, it's not really looking too good, but you know, he wants to talk to you. And I'll never forget, I got on the phone with my dad, and then so I got on the phone with my dad, and he was just like, hey, you know, you a man now, so you're 18. So so I need you to understand that the decisions that you're making, they're gonna follow you. You know what I mean? The consequences that come with these decisions, you know, this isn't something that you're not gonna get any more slaps on your wrist. You're gonna have to deal with these things like an adult, like a man. And so I need you to be conscious of that. And, you know, I'll always love you, and I'm always here for you, but there's nothing I can do for you at this point. And so
he was in county at that point too.
I was in the county, so I'm in jail talking to him. But I never knew that would be the last time I ever talked to him again, because I ended up getting out, and because my priority was to get back, you know, even though what he said resonated to a certain point, now that I'm 35 and looking back at 18, I didn't, you know, it went through one ear and out the other. And so when I ended up getting out, I went back to the nonsense, back to the streets. And like 3 days after that, you know, he passed away. And so that kind of drove me like deeper into just being away from home. And because my mom, who was still dealing with my brother, but my brother had moved out. He had went to like a board and care facility at 11 years old, because my dad's health declined so much to where it was like he wasn't able to help out with my brother like he used to.
So your mom had a full plate.
My mom had a lot, but she didn't have it. Like, even though she had the heart and the desire to care for her autistic son, she wasn't educated, and she didn't have the time to really like take to work with him. And so she, you know, even against her own will, but it was what was best, she put him in a board and care facility so that they could help him develop, you know, like at 11, he didn't even really know how to use the restroom on his own and things like that. And so he went to a facility, right? And I say facility because that's kind of like the terminology.
It's like a home though.
But it's a home, yeah. It's like a family home. But he was 11 years old. So he was 11 years old when he went there, and so my mom would get him like every weekend, but she was dealing with that, and then so by the time my dad passed away, you know, she was still handling business for my brother, but because she had been married, up to that point, she had been married to my dad, I believe. Hopefully I'm correct, but had been about like 23 years, you know. And so her husband of 23 years, who she has her only children with, passed away. And I'm running amok in and out of jail. She's grieving. She's worried about me every time I leave the house. Yeah. But she's worried about my brother. There's a lot on her plate. So her husband passed away, and I didn't know how to see her like that, because I hadn't been, my mom has always been a strong woman, you know. Yeah. She had to be in order to care for my brother, for me, you know. And so when I saw my mom the way that she was, like, it made me not want to be around her, because that was a hard, you know, reality to face, seeing my mom grieve the way that she did. And so looking back, I wish that I would have been there for my mom, but I left, was out the house doing my thing, ended up getting into some more trouble. Make a long story short, end up in prison, you know, with for 6 years. Well, I got sentenced to 6 years. I only did 3. Mm-hmm. So, and then with 2 strikes. Mm-hmm. By the time I was 20 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so I do my time, and when I went to prison, I hadn't really I knew about God, and I knew about I would say the concept of God. Mm-hmm. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up like really knowing too much about the Bible. I knew who Jesus was. I knew that he died for our sins. Like it was a concept of Christianity that I knew of. Sure. But I didn't know God. I didn't know who Christ truly was. I didn't know anything about, what he required of me as his creation, as, you know what I'm saying? So, but I was always curious about spiritual things, and so when I got locked up at 20 years old, I hit the yard. I ended up meeting a dude who, man, he was into the word. And so he started talking about God with me, and he started sharing things with me, and I asked my mom to purchase a Bible because I wanted to know more. So I ended up getting the Bible, and I started reading it, and it was foreign. I didn't really understand. I got a King James version too. That was the worst thing I could do, right? Thee, thou, though. I didn't know what was going on, but I started reading, and the more that I read, the more I understood the language. Yeah. That's the thing about the scriptures, right? It's a spiritual language. Even though you're reading it in English, there's a spiritual language, and the more that you're introduced to it, the more that you grasp what's being said. When you start really like hearing the voice of God, though you're reading the book, you're hearing his voice. Yeah. And so it becomes more than just words on a page. And so I started reading Proverbs. That's it, like a lot of the things that I read in there. I started reflecting on my life and decisions that I made, and I really it was a moment. It was like a season of time of self-examination. But yet still, like I was still in there wilding. I ended up I was going to church services in and out, right? You would have people from the outside, from the, civilian world come in and have, and minister the gospel, have church services while you in there. And so I would go to these church services, and it would be edifying, but there was still like an internal war.
How so?
Well, like I think I was still dealing with the fact I'm young. Like I still got my life ahead of me. Like, what is it? I'm gonna be a Christian now. What does that mean? All these things I'm gonna have to stop doing? Because I learned very fast, after reading that word, that there was things that he was gonna require of me. You know what I'm saying? Like that in the middle thing that, that you see a lot of people do. That wasn't an option for me.
Nah,
that's right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It was like either you all the way in or you not. And so I understood that, and a part of me wasn't ready for that. Yeah. But like there was a lot of things that happened. Like I had dreams and visions, and God was communicating to me in supernatural ways to really show me like I didn't have any other option. There was no out. It was either I was in or I was going to spend my life behind bars. Yeah. And I'll never forget, one day I walked out of my cell and I seen an older cat. He looked just like me. Like he was tall, kind of lanky, but he had a head full of grays. And he was sagging, and God, it's not so much about the sagging, right? But it was like, look at his mentality. He's probably 60, 70 years old, and he was still thugging, in jail, in prison, and you could see it all on him. And God showed me, like, if you don't make a decision, like if you don't make a decision right now, that's going to be you. Like, what else needs to happen? What else do you need to experience? It's either, you got a slap on the wrist. You only got 3 years. I got a homeboy right now. He's still down. He's been gone since we was 16. He's my age, so you got a slap on the wrist. And yeah, you wasn't the most gangster, dude out there. You wasn't, kicking up a whole bunch of dust or anything like that. But all it takes is one night, one decision. People like that. People right now all it took was one time, and they gone
Yep.
for the rest of their life.
Yep.
They didn't get no other chances.
Preach, man.
And so, I really took heed, and I ended up, the spirit came over me one night, and I prayed, and I started feeling bad about the things that I did in the past, the stuff that I did to women, the way that I treated, I was a womanizer. I've been with a lot of different women, when I was young, 18, 19, 20, 16, 17, trying to be a player. Stuff I had did to people. You know what I mean? Stuff I had done to my community, in my community. And I started feeling convicted about those things. Faces started flashing in my mind, like conversations started flashing in my mind. And it was and I started being real conscious of the evil that I had done in my life. And so, I as much as I was aware of that, I was aware of God's mercy for not allowing anything to happen to me during this time. Like, even though my consequences ended up catching up to me to a certain extent, it wasn't what I deserved. Not only naturally, but spiritually. There was times that I should have been dead. I shouldn't be here,
I remember that one story you told me.
Yeah. Oh, about when I tried to break it. Like, yeah. Like, literally, I was breaking. I was trying to hit a lick, break into a house, and there was a dude on the other end of the window with a loaded shotgun on the phone with dispatch, and told him, like, if I come in, he was going to shoot me. Yeah. And just by God's grace, I wasn't able to get in the house, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know that was about to happen. Had I gotten into that house, he would have blew my brains out. Yeah. Not to be graphic, but that was what's going to happen to me, and it happens all the time. And I'm nobody special for that to not happen to. Yeah. Like, I'm not the exception. God had favor on me and mercy to in a way that I'll never understand, and I don't know why. But because of that, I was able to appreciate in what is it? What's that word? It's God's kindness that draws us to repentance. We'll really understand how kind he is and how merciful he is. We don't take advantage of that. That's not something that we play with. That should bring us to our knees. That should be enough to win us over. Nothing else. Where do I find that love at? Yeah. And so I ended up praying that night, and the Holy Spirit fell over me, man, and I ended up getting baptized in prison, and so that was kind of like the beginning of my journey. And then I got out, but all that happened within probably the 6 months of me getting out of prison. So it's kind of crazy how it happened.
Talk about it, bro, because I know, I want you to talk about what it was like once you got out and stuff, and then you've now submitted to the Lord, and you're like, hey, my life's yours. Yeah. But it's not like everything goes away.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
The moment he comes in and inhabits us, right? And then we're changed, but it's still there's still real life, right, happening, and we still got our wounds and our scars and trauma and all these different ways of life that we've been used to and accustomed to. And now it's those things start to get weeded out. Exactly.
Well, yeah, I think, and I like the way that you said that, because there's what sanctification, is a process, right? Mm-hmm. And we say that, we say that, and we make that a doctrine, right? We make it an idea. We make it like a biblical concept. But it's literally a reality that all of us have to walk out. And so, and it looks different. And that's the thing, it looks different.
It ain't pretty, bro.
Yeah. It ain't nice. It's not pretty. I mean, it's a lot of things are going to happen that's not to be expected. But for me specifically, when I got out, you go through that overzealous phase, right? Where it's Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. But it's No, there needs to be a lot of healing. There needs to be a lot of forgiveness. A lot of growth and maturity, not just spiritually, but psychologically. The renewing of the mind. The word talks a lot about the renewing of the mind. And so I think that like for me, when I was a new believer and I'm new to the faith and I'm new to certain spiritual concepts, I meant well, but it wasn't executed right. Yeah. And so I got out. I didn't have any leadership. I didn't have a pastor. I didn't have a mentor. It was just me and a whole bunch of zeal, a whole bunch of passion. Yeah. But I guess you would say so I get out. I meet my wife. So I met my wife in prison. And I meet her, and I think I jumped into a relationship too soon. And I'm not saying I regret doing it, but I think that I wanted to be, I felt like I needed to be in a relationship in order to not be a whoremonger again. You feel me? Yeah. So I think that was, instead of just relying on the Lord to keep me in my singleness and train me up and prepare me for what he wanted me to do next, I jumped into a relationship. So that's step one. She ended up introducing me to her church, right? She took me to church because that's what we're told to do, right? You get saved, you encounter the living God, you fill with the Holy Spirit, then you congregate, then you find believers, right? Mm-hmm. So I went to a church and I'm thinking that everybody's on what I'm on, right? I'm thinking everybody loves the Lord. Like, yeah. I'm super naive at this point. Yeah. Everybody loves the Lord. And you find out fast, and I don't want to throw nobody under the bus, but you find out fast that
talk about it. Yeah.
That's not the case.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving the sinful lifestyle. I'm fresh out of prison. I was around all of that, the nonsense. I get home, I'm trying to live holy. So, and then I come into some more nonsense, but I'm looking for genuine fellowship. I'm looking for camaraderie, for brotherhood, for accountability. And I didn't find that there. And so I was disappointed. I was let down. So I went from feeling alone in the world to feeling alone in the church. And especially like you go to a church, a lot of times these people know each other and they've been with each other for years, and you have people that have been raised in the church, and you have pastors' kids, and you have cliques and things like that. And I'm the new guy. Nobody knows who I am. I didn't grow up in this world, so I'm new. Yeah. And so I'm already getting the side eye from jump. Yeah. And then the teaching it was a whole other thing. Yeah. It's like I don't agree with the teaching because I'm reading the word, and what's being taught it's not aligning. And so I ended up leaving that church, and then I found another church. While I was at that church, everything was cool for the most part. Mm-hmm. I didn't have too much of a problem with even like meeting people. Like I met some solid people there at the second church that I ended up going to. But I ended up getting hurt there because, and this is a whole nother story in itself, and you know this. Mm-hmm. So a year and a half after me getting out of prison, I got custody of my son, my oldest son. So he came to live with me during that time, and then it was me and my mom. So me and my mom were living together, and then my son came to live there. So now I'm in a relationship. I have the responsibility of taking care of my son, who I didn't even know at that point. Because when I went in prison, my son was born, probably like 2 months after I started my 3-year sentence. So I didn't even get out until he was 3 years old. So then that was the whole thing, trying to build with him. This child who's already 3 at this point, grew up underneath his mom. Now he's moving with me. I haven't been consistent in his life enough for him to really know me like that. But, you know, as a father, I took on the responsibility to raise my son. And so now I'm trying to do that. But I don't even know how to raise myself like that properly. But what I do know is I have a whole lot of zeal and a whole lot of passion, and I got the Lord, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we're told is enough. But it wasn't enough, because we need to be trained. And the men need older men to teach them.
Yeah, bro, we need to be discipled.
Exactly. Yeah. But I took on the world thinking everything was going to go smooth. But what I didn't know is that 3-4 months after me getting my son, my mom passed away. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So then, she was in a bad car accident, and it was hard for her even after I got out, because prior to me getting out, when I was in prison for about a year, and I know I'm all over the place, but backtracking, when I was in there after my first year, she got diagnosed with breast cancer. So then, by the grace of God, she ended up beating that. And then my last couple of months before I got out, she was on dialysis. She had kidney failure. So when I get home, my mom's so beat up. You know, she's about 53, 54 at this point. But she's so beat up physically to where it's like I had to help her. So there was times I ended up finding a job, right? So I'm working and I would help her. But it was my pleasure, because now I'm coming from a righteous standpoint. And now instead of feeling like I need to expect from her, I'm like, because she always been there. Like, she was there to bail me out, put money on my books, whatever I needed, she was there, even to her own detriment at times. But I felt like it was my reasonable service to give back to her, even though I wasn't making a lot. But it would, like, she would ask me for gas money and I'll give it to her. And it was I was a little nervous about it, because she had I never seen her ask me for anything, especially financially. But, she wasn't really doing too well financially, because when I ended up looking at a lot of the bills, after she had passed away, I was going through a lot of paperwork, and she wasn't doing good at all. But nonetheless, that's a whole other story. But she ended up passing away, and then that changed everything for me. And when I was going to the church, I had to kind of deal with that on my own, and I ended up being better towards, the church I was going to, because, I felt like nobody was there for me like that, and so then that put a bad taste in my mouth, and I didn't even want fellowship anymore. And I felt like the same people that the church was telling me to stay away from, like my homeboys that I cut off, a lot of my homeboys who the church was telling me I didn't want to have anything to do with, because they're bad, they're going to get you back in sin, they're of the world. Yeah. And I understand what they were trying to do, but those were the people that were there. Those were the people who pulled up to my house to check up on me. Those were the people that I had isolated from. And the church didn't do that for me. And so that really changed my perspective, and it kind of messed me up a little bit. And so for years after that, I wasn't even interested in going to church at all. I still loved the Lord. I was still, in my word, still even trying my best to preach the gospel, but it had a different aim. I was now, instead of going to church, I'm trying to pour into my homies who came around. Yeah. Okay, y'all want to be around me? Y'all here for me? Y'all love me enough to come, and surround me when I needed y'all the most, then y'all gonna get this gospel too then. And so it was kind of like, I see how the Father was kind of killing two birds with one stone, because he was trying to uproot a form of godliness. He was trying to stop me from taking upon a form of godliness before it happened. But he was also like, no, I do want you to, I want to use you too. You know what I'm saying? At the same time. Yeah. And so, that's kind of like where I was at that point. And, wow. Yeah. So at that point, I ended up getting married to my girlfriend, who my wife, the woman that obviously I met when I got out, she ended up becoming my wife. And then shortly after that, we got married, and immediately she got pregnant with my second son. And so while she was pregnant, so after my mom passed away, I was still like trying my best to, help out with my brother, because my brother was still in this boarding care facility at that point. So I tried my best to help out with my brother. And then, so I think 2 years after my mom passed away, the lady that had been caring for my brother for, at that point, 13, 14 years, said that my brother's behavior started changing. And so she was going to have to give him a 30-day notice. After that 30-day notice, he was going to have to leave because they didn't have the proper infrastructure to care for him, because he would stay up all night. Like, he wasn't, like, things were changing. And I think that because he didn't understand, like, that my mom passed, he didn't understand, like, what that, like, all that entailed, that he started grieving in his own way, you know what I'm saying? And so his sleep pattern changed, and they said he couldn't stay there anymore because he was becoming a liability, and which I understand, as much as they had loved him, because they pretty much raised him at that point, you know what I'm saying, alongside my mom. So they were like family, and it hurt them to let my brother go, you know what I'm saying? But they were like, we have no other choice. So I ended up, I remember that night when I had that conversation with her, and I broke down because I was concerned. I knew I wasn't able to care for my brother because I just got married. I have custody of my son. My wife is pregnant. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment. He needed a lot of work. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like I could take him. Mm-hmm. And so, I was concerned because he had been with them for 13 years, and he's all they knew. And so going to a new place, what does that look like for him? So he ended up probably 30-day notice. Probably a couple months later, he ended up finding another place. And then, so I went there, I met the lady, I met the husband. There were a couple, they had like 2-3 kids. So they had the way that the house was set up, they had a main house and they had a side house. So I went to the side house, checked it out, saw my brother there, signed some papers because I was his conservator at that point. I had went to court and became his legal guardian, like legal conservator. So I handled all his paperwork, everything like that. And so when I signed his intake form, that's what they call it, everything seemed cool. Mm-hmm. I met the lady, met the husband, told him, like, kind of gave him a little background history of my brother as much as I could. And it was like an hour, 2-hour meeting. So I tried to, just tell him a little bit about myself, my family. And so that was that. And so I ended up leaving. A week later, I was in Florida visiting my father-in-law. I get a call on the phone, and it's from my aunt, my mother's sister. She calls me and she says that the new place that my brother had just moved in a week prior had caught on fire. So then, I didn't know what to expect. So make a long story short, my brother ended up passing away in that fire. So then there was an investigation. And that took dang near 2 years to find out what happened there. Mm-hmm. So after the investigation, come to find out that I guess the husband allegedly snapped and, killed everybody in the house, including himself. So it was a murder-suicide. So then my brother was gone. So then at that point, I had to deal with the reality that, okay, your dad's gone, your mom's gone, now your twin brother's gone. And though my twin brother was autistic, right? He had a disability in the relationship. Obviously, we wasn't able to have like as if, someone who has I wouldn't say normal, but a generic relationship with I don't even know how to say it, man. Like,
Yeah,
because I don't want to say like he's not normal, like he's not abnormal, but somebody that you can communicate with.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Right? But it was still a sense of identity because that's my family, you know? And I felt like me taking care of my brother was also a service to my mom and my father. And so then once he was gone, it was like, that was different. They hit different in the way that it happened too. You know what I mean? Like I felt like it was a lot of guilt. Like, did I not pick up on something? Like, you know, like should I have known that happened? Like, was there something I could have done to prevent it? Like, so there's a lot of guilt that you go through, a lot of bitterness, resentment, anger to the lady and the family. Still don't know what really happened or how it happened. All I can do is this is the conclusion that we came through. This is the conclusion that we came to after the investigation. So this must be the story. And so even still, there's a whole lot of unresolved issues, a lot of unanswered questions, but I'll learn to make peace with it, man. And so that's kind of like, so grieving and going through that was an experience in and of itself, and trying to heal through that. And that's not nothing that you can be prepared for. You can read the Bible as much as you want to. You can pray and fast as much as you want to, but until you in that moment, you know, that's going to show you what's really in you. Mm-hmm. And a lot came out, and there was a lot that happened during that time, but I was able to grow through it, get through it, and I'm still here, you know. And so shortly after that, what's interesting is that I think that like God is sovereign, man. Like, and I think that after me going through that, there was something in my heart that opened up to where, like, the need for fellowship became even more a priority and important, because as much as I didn't want to be involved with other believers and Christians and I would call them church folk, like I yearned for that again, because I knew that I couldn't bear this burden and this load on my own. And so literally the day after I buried my brother, I ended up going to an event, and that's where I met the brother Dante from HOG MOB.
Okay.
So the day after the my brother's funeral, I went to an event, and I met Dante, and Seven was there, and so I had known a mutual friend, you know, a brother who was in the ministry. His ministry at the time was Westsiders.
Okay.
And so I had knew the dude there who was fellowshipping with him at that time, and we ended up becoming pretty close. And so he's the one who invited me to the event. So I met Dante, and like I said, I had just buried my brother. So and I heard of Dante. I never met him personally face to face, but I heard, you know, who he was, and so I went up to him at this event and I introduced myself, and I just told him, like, hey man, I'm just looking for fellowship and discipleship, you know, and I just want to be taught, man. I don't want nothing else from you. Like, I just want to serve. I just want to, you know, learn how to really walk this thing out right. Because up until that point, I had never had a leader or a pastor or anybody that was consistent. But by the grace of God, there were people that God had sent along the way. But I didn't really have no one that was consistent in my life walking with me, or really even understood how to walk with me. Because there was a whole lot of, it was like a whole lot of, like, I was a complex individual at that point. You know what I mean? Like, if you
layers. Yeah.
So if you hear my story, there's layers to it, right? And so I was not an easy person to deal with, because there was so much hurt and so much like pain and so much like mystery, you know, mystique about myself because of all the things. Like, how do you deal with a dude who's been through this and that, but wants to serve Christ, blah, blah, you know what I'm saying? Blase, blah. And so that's me personally. I think that the people that God has sent in my life couldn't necessarily like identify with me. And so, but when I met Dante, he kind of became like a big brother, kind of took me under his wing. And so that's when slowly but surely I started started getting introduced to HOG MOB Ministries. And so that's when I ended up going to a men's retreat. I met Seven, I met Dante, and I started meeting, a couple other brothers during that time. But once I met Seven, he started pouring into me. He came alongside. He was a big brother, and he started holding me accountable, even when it came to my marriage, when it came to my gifts, my talents. I started doing music. I started doing Christian rap. And he gave me an opportunity to excel in that gift, and I thank God for him. And so it just really taught me how to be responsible. It taught me how to even be a leader. And so after that, man, So I'm married, and then I end up having more children. Yeah, I end up having more children, man. And I mean, the story continues. So I don't want to,
it's whatever you want to share, bro.
Give you an opportunity to ask whatever questions you want to ask. Or
Well, I would love to ask, bro. Just because you share your story, but also you got wisdom and stuff, and so I would love for you to share, even whether it's a burden or the beauty or what you see, like the invisible church, God's people, what it could look like in engaging someone coming out of a certain type of brokenness, someone coming out of the pen, someone coming out of the streets and stuff. Yeah. A lot of times it's engaged, and I'm not trying to critique nobody, but I want to hear what your perspective is and stuff. So.
Yeah, man, I think that and I was talking with a brother the other day. I think that what we can do better as the body of Christ, is understanding that like there's a mold that oftentimes we try to make people conform to, but that mold isn't Christ. You know what I'm saying? Which it should be. We should be encouraging people to conform to the image of Christ, but we know it's not a look. It's not a construct, right? It's a nature. You know what I'm saying? And so that nature looks different on different people. So, like, for instance, you have a dude who might come out of prison, and he might look a certain type of way. He might dress a certain type of way. His mannerisms might be a certain type of way, and we'll look at that and be like, bad. That's worldly, that's evil, that's wicked. Yeah. But there's nothing moral or immoral about any of these things. This is who this person is. This is where they come from. This is their culture. The moral and immoral part is the actions, you know what I mean? The intent, the behavior, the life that's lived out. That's what makes a person moral or immoral. So, but we've kind of like adopted this like, evangelical mindset of looking at, our brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You have to dress like this. You have to talk like this. You have to have this Christian language in order to fit in with us. It's like, no, be yourself. I want you to be yourself. I appreciate the difference. And that's the thing. Like when people say, oh, I don't see difference in people. Nah. Like I want you to see the difference, and I want you to appreciate that about me. You know what I mean? Because to say that you don't see it is almost like,
it's insulting.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you don't see, like, not to sound prideful, but like God made each person special and beautiful. Exactly. So it's to say like, you're nothing special, bro. I look at everybody, Right. But there's beauty in every person. Right.
And so you got to, recognize that beauty even in something that society says isn't beautiful, and so I think that we can do a better job of really understanding, like, no, get all of these false traditions and standards and everything that we're trying to uphold, and really let's get back to what the scripture says, that is important to the Most High. What's important to the Most High? Pure religion, caring for the orphans, caring for the widows, loving your neighbor, serving each other, putting people above yourself, not repaying evil for evil. You know what I mean? These concepts of the divine nature, self-control, patience, the fruit of the spirit. That's what makes somebody. That's how you identify another believer, a fellow brother and sister in the faith. Not by the way they dress, not by the way they look, not their stance, not their demeanor. You know what I mean? And so
Not even their background.
Not even their background. Exactly. We don't regard nobody according to the flesh. So there's things that we're not supposed to be focused on. I understand, like, as a shepherd, you want to be cautious of who you invite into the fold. Sure. But we don't get to determine who comes into the fold based on our own standards. You know what I'm saying?
That's good.
So that's what I would say we need to do better on as the body.
Yeah.
Yeah. In that aspect.
Yeah. Ricky, I wanted to see if you got anything on your heart that you're wanting to ask too.
Absolutely. First of all, what a blessing to share that testimony. I mean, it's blessed me. I mean, and just hearing it, and I'm sure it's gonna bless the viewers. I'm just admired, and the viewers will be too, because the strength that God has given you to go through all those trials, you know, the storms that you didn't see coming, and you God gave you the strength to get through them. Yeah. And so you know, just you didn't fall back, you fell forward. Yeah. You kept pushing, and that's huge. Yeah. Because people are gonna look at that, and because things are gonna happen, life's gonna happen, and this is man, this is strong for people to understand that, you know, I've had my similar situations, right? But we're still here, and I just wanted to ask though, like, you know, what would you suggest to people? Because I've also experienced that too, where when you go into church, and that was very powerful what you said, you know, and they kind of like separate you, you know. What would you say to the viewers if that happens to them? Like, what kind of advice would you give them? Because I've actually had that happen to me, and I've still kept going. I still kept pushing forward. Is that I know that you said that you wanted that again. Yeah. You know, after this, you needed that, and God opened the door for that for you. Yeah. So what would you say to people that go through that? What would be some advice that you would give them?
I would say, man, you know, first off, it ain't right. It's not cool. And what you feeling, you know, when you feel like you've been ostracized or disenfranchised, it's a legitimate feeling. Because I think the first thing that people would say when they feel that way, they go to somebody and it's like, oh, you shouldn't trust in people and you shouldn't look to man, and, you know, and all of those things are true. It's correct, right? You shouldn't trust in man. You shouldn't look to, but we're supposed to be the body of Christ. And there is a certain standard, and when that standard isn't met, there's a legitimate disappointment. So first off, I want anybody who's gone through that or is going through that right now, that it is a legitimate concern, and you should have a problem with it. But also on the other end, it's like also recognizes that they don't know, they're growing too. You know, we've been fed a narrative, man. Like, I used to think personally, you know, no offense to anybody, but I used to think that all white people were racist. There's white people that think that all black people are thugs and gangbangers. You know, there's people really out there like that. Not saying all of them do think that way, but there's been a narrative that's been pushed. You know, we live in a sinful world. Satan is the god of this age. And so there's you know, we've been fed a social construct of who our neighbor is. And just because people are in church doesn't mean that they're all the way completely convinced of that. Like, for instance, when Paul, when he came to faith, he went to the church, they didn't receive him. They looked at him funny. They said, man, you was out here.
Yeah, we know exactly who you are.
Yeah, it's going to take some minutes. It's going to take a while for us to, you know, rock with you. Yeah. because we remember what you was out there doing. And so it took time, and it took patience on both of their part to be able to reconcile and come together. And so the same thing when you go to church and you come from a certain lifestyle, it's going to take time for people to trust you, and that's just human nature. You know what I'm saying? So I think that that's something that we got to consider, because we like to take the victim, but we got to stand back and really be willing to see things from our neighbor's standpoint.
Sure.
So, even with Peter, Peter was walking with Christ, and, he was with the Messiah in the flesh, was filled with the Holy Spirit. Pentecost had already happened. And we read Paul having to rebuke Peter because he still had a bit of a bias and a prejudice when it came to the Gentiles, to almost to the point to where God had to literally appear to him in a dream, in a vision rather, you know what I'm saying? And show him like, look, what I'm doing, don't call what I've made clean unclean. And so I think that when you understand that this once again, back to the sanctification part, when you understand that, it irons things out, and it makes you understand that this isn't personal. This is something that I'm not going through just by myself. It's happened in times past, and it's happening now, and I'm just gonna have to endure it, and now let my love and my long suffering come into play and activate.
Amen.
Yeah.
Bro, what's your prayer for the church? God's people, you know what I'm saying? And like in mind of like the way in which the church in America is and stuff. What's your prayer?
And that we be one. Yeah. That's what the Messiah said. That's what Christ said. Yeah. That was his prayer. That would be one, just as him and the Father is one.
What do you see hindering you?
Politics, doctrine, theology, traditions. Denominational differences. It's a lot. Classism. The same thing that's dividing all of mankind. But his prayer will be answered, because what we do see in Revelations at the throne, and we spoke about it the other day, is that people from all tongues, all tribes, all nations worshiping the Lamb. So we know that his prayer will be answered, and it will come to fruition. We don't see it now, but it's gonna happen.
Amen.
We get glimpses of it.
Yeah, it's happening right now. So, but as a collective whole, it's gonna happen one day. But that's my prayer. Yeah, to be able to at least see it in my lifetime.
Well,
yeah. What else, Josh? Is there anything else you want to share, bro?
I just want to let you know. I just want to just say I appreciate you having me. Anybody watching this, I'm not as much as I've been through and as much as I've experienced and have been allowed to see and be a part of. Man, I'm not no different than anybody watching, really. I started where a lot of y'all started off at. I made many mistakes. I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like you. I have my shortcomings, my struggles, my insecurities, and all of that. I'm not any different. I don't want to be glorified or glamorized. Everything that I went through and spoke today is and have endured is only because of the power of God. That's it. That's the only reason I'm here, and the only way that I'm here. And so I just want to once again just say I appreciate both of y'all for having me, allowing me to share my story, and yeah, man, appreciate the opportunity.
It's a blessing, bro, and honestly, like it's an honor to sit with you, my brother, and like to just hear your heart and God's grace and faithfulness and what he's done. But also, like, dude, when we listen to one another, I think God does something mysteriously in people's hearts. So my prayer is that people learn to listen to one another, because I think he reveals things in the midst of those things, you know.
Right.
Especially if people are listening to a neighbor that they maybe haven't ever listened to, you know. So yeah, I pray he moves and speaks to people's hearts through this, bro. Yeah. Ricky, is there anything else you want to?
That's it.
All right, bro. Bless us, adios.
For sure.